Amud base, 2 lines from the top. Yored Litbal. Yored Litbal and Yochel Lali. So the Mishnah said if a person went to be Toivel, and if he can complete his tefillah and come up and cover himself and recite Krishma before Hanetzachama, then he should. But if not, if he's not going to be able to complete before Hanetzachama, he should recite Krishma immersed in the water with his body, immersed in water with his head above his body in the water. We'll see some of the details on that shortly. However, in any event, the Mishnah gives the time period, Hanetzachama, that if he can complete his tefillah by Hanetzachama. So, let's say that the Tana is Saisim like Rabbi Lezer, who says that Krishma must be recited by Hanetzachama, because otherwise, why would we permit this kula that he can recite the Krishma while he is in the mikvah or in the river? Why would we permit that if he is able to recite Krishma afterwards? If it's like a Yeshua that he has till 3 hours of the day, why would we permit him this kula and say if he cannot complete it by nets, he should recite Krishma in the mikvah? The Gemara says, no, you could say it is even according to Rav Yeshua. And we permit this even according to Rav Yeshua, even though he could recite Krishma later. But perhaps this person we're referring to is conducting himself like the Vasikin. The Vasikin were very meticulous, and they used to complete the Krishma with Hanetz and then be Sena Gula Tfilah and Damach Manase with Hanetzachama. So therefore, perhaps this person is particularly meticulous, and therefore, in order to enable him to recite Krishma in the preferred manner, we allow him this kula to recite it in the mikvah. Doesn't mean a person who is generally or always meticulous in this mitzvah to kivasikin, or means, even if a person generally is not, but he wants to now be mekayim it in the Mahudadik way to recite it by Netzachama, perhaps even for him, we would allow this kula to recite it in the mikveh. V'im lav, if he does not have enough time, so the Mishnah says, if not, he should cover himself with the water and recite the Krishma while in the water. For the Gemara, how could that be permitted? There's no separation between his heart and the erva. So his heart, so to speak, is viewing the erva, and there has to be a separation between the lave and the erva. So we're talking about the water which is cloudy. It's cloudy water, so it's considered like it's now covered, that there's a covering. And if he's in the cloudy water, it's now therefore not a problem of royas erva. If he's in clear water, yesh b'hem at tzavora v'kair. He is in the clear water. He sits at tzavora. His head is above the water, so his eyes are not looking at viewing the erva. Yeshem at tzavora v'kair. V'yeshem oichem baragel, and some say he kicks up some of the mud with his foot, makes it cloudy, and therefore he's covered with cloudy water. So now, according to the Yesh Omrim, we understand, like we previously said, that if the water is muddy, cloudy water, it's like he's completely covered. It's like he has a covering on him, so his erva is not exposed, the leaf is not royal erva. But according to the Tanakama, it's clear water. It's just that his head is above the water, so his head is not looking at the erva, but his leaf is. The Tanakama, how does the Tanakama deal with that? Is only his head is above the water, but the water is clear, his leif is right there. The Tanakama holds that liba rois herva is mutter. His akev, his heel, is viewing the erva. The Gemara is assuming now that any limb cannot see the erva. Now, even if you hold that liba rois erva is mutter, even if you hold, the way some Rishonim explain, that a aver that normally sees the erva, he does not aser. Tanakama says it's muter. The eyes that normally doesn't see the erva cannot see the erva. The lay, which normally there's no separation, could see the erva. But frankly, the Gemara, the heel normally is not opposite the erva. If he's now in this malkum of the water with the clear water, his heel is looking at the erva, is viewing the erva, should be also no. Kasavara akvaroy erva muter. He holds that it doesn't apply to the heel. There's no isser of the heel viewing the erva. It's some place where it will have an influence on the person whether he sees it. When he sees it, then it has an influence on the person. But otherwise, a limb which it doesn't influence and cause any kind of effect here or for the person, it does not. There's no isser being away there. If it only views it as mutter negea, if it's touching the erva, avaya amar also rava mutter, it's machlekes. Rav Zid masal hashmaitz hachi. Abchen in the breder vike masal hachi. He learns it in the following manner. Negea, he learns it differently. Negea divra kol also. If it's touching, everyone agrees that it's also roy. If it's only viewing it, avaya amar also rava mutter. Rav says, no, if it's over mutter, it's loy nitna ter l'malochi ashuras. If Torah is not given to Malachi Ashuras, we cannot be careful to that extent. The Hilchasa, what's the halacha negea also, touching is also roya mutter, but just seeing it is mutter. Taisa says Hilchasa negea is also, he says it's a gzera, really it shouldn't be also a gzera of negea shema yiga b'yadei. We're afraid if he touches with his heel, he might touch it with his hand, and really the issue is if he touches with his hand. If there is soy excrement in like a lantern, it's, for instance, it's covered in a glass container. So it's covered, but you can see it. Mutter likros krisha kenegda. It's mutter, even though you can see it, but it's in a separate container. It's mutter to recite the krishma. Erva ba'ashoshes, but if there's an erva who's behind a glass partition, for instance, also likros krisha kenegda. Then it's also. What's the difference? Tzaya b'ashosh is mutu likras krisha kenegda. It's mutu wide. It's tzaya b'kisa t'ayim milsa. By tzaya, the inyan is over there v'haya machanecha kodesh, that you can't have in your midst. You can't have something unclean. You can't have tzaya in your midst. If it's now covered, it's now in a separate area. So even though you can see it, but it's not in your machne. So therefore, it's muter. So it's muter because it's covered. It's muter. Erva b'ashosh is also, but erva b'ashosh is also likros krisha kenegda. Why? Because the pasuk says v'lo yervacha erva zdom amarachmana. You can't see it. But if it's in a glass partition, it may be separated, but you can see it. And by erva, what it's dependent on is viewing it as seeing it. So therefore, it's also. If there's a tzaya, kol she'im with right. You nullify, literally means you nullify it with spit, but we'll see. Amarava b'reik of it means with like phlegm. It means it's thick, so it's covering it. So mele, it's now covered, and it's now not in your same place. It's covered over, and it's considered that it's in a separate market. Amarava tzaya beguma, if there's tzaya in a pit, Maniach sandal alav, you put your sandal, you're covered with your shoe, and you can recite Krishna. Now, even though you're covering it with an item of clothing that you're wearing, your shoe, nevertheless, it's mutter. It's considered in a separate place. So, maniach sandal alav Krishna, and you can recite the Krishna. By let's say it's stuck to the bottom of his foot. What's the din? The way some Rishonim speak it out is, do we say in the previous case, say begumetz davk in the pit, you can cover with the shoe because if he's covering with the shoe, it's not touching the tzaya, and that's why it's mutter, or that's just urcha the nelson nakan. But even if it is touching his shoe, even though he's touching his shoe, it would still be mutter. What's the din? It's a teiku. It's not clear because since the shoe is part of his body, is it considered to be now part of on his body, or do we say no? It's on his shoe, not on his body. It's mutter teiku. Rav Yehuda akum oru masal likros krishma kenegdai. A naked goy you cannot recite Krishma opposite. So why you tell me a goy? I feel Yisrael now, me even a yid. No, Gemara says Yisrael pshitulei da'aser. You don't have to tell me a yid. A yid is pshitulei da'aser. That's of course aser. Ela akum, but a goy, it's a chiddush. It's richele. You have to teach me that. You might think that it's not considered erva because the pasuk is medamet to the basar b'chamayrin ema kechamor ba'almahu, and it's not considered erva kamash malan dinu name ikra erva, that it is considered erva d'chsi ve'erva savim loy rov. So even though it's talking about a ben noyach, it's talking about noyach. Even by Ben Nayach, we say it's considered erva, so therefore it's also likrois Krishna. The Mishnah says, he covers himself with water, but he can't cover himself with dirty water. Not with putrid water, not with mishra water that flax was soaked in it. Now, it says until you put into it water. What do you mean? You're talking about this large body of water. You're going to dilute it with water. How much water are you going to keep putting into it to be able to dilute such a large body of water? Gemara says, no, that's not the pshat. That you can't recite the Krishma. No, you cover yourself rather in that type of water. You can't cover yourself at all. Now, if there's mei raglaim, you cannot recite Krishma opposite mei raglaim. Mei raglaim, you have to dilute it with water. There, you dilute it with water, then you can recite the Krishma. How much water? Any little bit. Rav Zakkai, I'm a revius. Rav Zakkai says, oh, it has to be a revius. It has to be a revius. Rav Nachman, that's only Masayif, meaning the mei raglaim is already there. And now you want to dilute it. But if the mei raglaim is not there, so if you first put the water, and then you're matal mei raglaim, everyone agrees that it's a kolsha. Any little bit. Rav Yosef Amar, he says, no, machlaikis l'charchila. Machlaikis is davchila l'charchila. When the water is first, but if the mei raglaim is there first, the rakol revius, everyone agrees that it has to be a revius to dilute it. Rav Yosef Lashami told his servant, Aisali revi also the Maya, bring me a revius of water, even though it's betchila. Rav Zakkai, he's machmer like Rav Zakkai. Ton Rabbanu Garav Shel Rei, Valvishal mei raglaim, a pot that's used for rei, or an avet pot used for mei raglaim. Also, likros Krishna b'keneged navav pi she'en behem klum. Even if there's no tzayer mei raglaim in the pot, since it's used regularly for that purpose, it's considered a davar maz, you cannot recite Krishna opposite. Mei raglaim atzman, and if it's the mei raglaim itself, you have to dilute it. V'kama yatal l'seicha, how much is needed? Mayim kosher. Any little bit of Zakkai, I'm a revius. And Rav Zakkai says revius. Now this is of the mei raglaim, it's bein lifnei amita, bein lachar amita. It's whether it's before the mita or after the mita. Whether it's in front of the mita, so there's no separation between the person and the mei raglaim, or it's la'achar mita, and the bed separates it. So the bed is causing a separation. It's still also. But Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer la'achar amita kara, lifnei amita ein kara. No, he says that l'achar mita, the mita, the bed, is considered a separation. There's no separation. He has to distance himself. So it's a machlokes. Is the mita considered a separation? Normally a partition 10 tefachim high is a separation. A mita is different. It has space underneath. There is an issue, therefore, is it considered a separation of Shem? But he says the whole house is considered one makam. It doesn't matter before a bed, after the bed, and even if it's a huge house, you cannot declare a Krishna unless it's covered. If it's exposed, it doesn't matter how far you are away from it, anywhere in the house, or even if it's in before or behind the bed, but if it's covered, then it's a different story. So therefore, if it's under the bed is covering. Now we'll see shortly what's the height of the bed, but if the bed is covering it, then it's much otherwise he holds in the whole house is also. So now going back to the previous statement, what is the pshat? How do we explain the statement that was made of Rav Shimon Gamliel? So the Bab Sagir says, Heichi kom Rav Shimon Gamliel. If it's behind the bed, did he mean to say that if it's behind the bed, you can recite Krish immediately? If it's in front of the mita, you have to distance yourself, and you can recite. Perhaps this would have been even if it's behind the mita, you still have to distance yourself. If it's in front of the mita, and a karakal. But if it's in front of the mita, it doesn't matter the distance, how far it is. There's no separation. You can't recite at all. What did Rav Shimon Gamliel mean? So from the following brisa. Now we'll see this brisa seems to have reverse the opinions of Rav Shimon Gamliel and Rav Shimon ben Elazar. It seems to be the same opinion, but it attributes what was previously attributed to Rav Shimon Gamliel to Rav Shimon ben Elazar, and vice versa. So now, the first opinion in this second brisa is Rav Shimon ben Elazar Aimer Achar Mita Kara Miyad. If it's behind the Mita, you can be Kara Miyad right away. Lifnei Mita Marche Garba Hamas. If it's in front of the bed, you're Marche Dalet Hamas. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Aimer Afil Abayis Meya Ama Lo Yikra Achi Yitzim Mashanichim Tarasan Mita. So you see that these are the two opinions. Now, who it's attributed to is a steer between the brises, but they're the same opinions, and you see that this opinion, which was previously attributed to Rav Shimon ben Elazar, he says clearly that if it's behind the mita, you don't have to be marchik at all, you can recite it right away. If it's lifnei mita, you're marchik dalet. Mora says, Bayan, if you resolved our question, our inquiry. You resolved that. It's clear now what that sheet of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel in the first brisa, what he meant. If it's behind the mita, you can recite immediately. If it's in front of the mita, you're marching dalet. But masnaisa kashan al dani. But it seems to be a steer in the brises. It seems to be a steer. Who said what? Simura says epok vasraisa. You have to reverse the opinions in the second brisa to make it consistent with the first brisa. Why are you switching around the second one? Why? So rather say perhaps that the first one has to be reversed. Gemara says no. The opinion that in the first brisa that says the whole house, even if it's Meyama, is also is attributed to Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Now we know from elsewhere who is the one that says that the whole house is considered only like Dalet Ames, it's considered like one makam, even though it's Meyama, it's like Dalet Ames. That's Rav Shimon ben Elazar here. Not clear where he says this other opinion. Rashi says, but Gemara is attributing that Ashita to him, and therefore the first brisa, which attributes that opinion to Rav Shimon ben Elazar, has to be the one that's davka, so it's Epok plus Raisa. Amar Rav Yosef Boimin, Rav Huna, he asked from Rav Huna the following shaila, Mita pachas mishleisha, shitali, the kalovadami. So we said if it's under the bed, then the bed is considered covering it, and it's mutar likrat Krishna. What is the height of the bed? So he said it's pshita, it's pashat, that if it's within 3 tvachim from the ground, it's kalovad, it's considered like it's extended down to the ground, it's now attached to the ground, therefore it's considered that it's covered by the bed, and then it's mutar. Pshita lit kalovadami. What about if the height is between 3 and 9? He said that I don't know. Asara, if it's 10 or more high, that's not a shayla. Then I don't have a shayla. It's proper, you've said good that you didn't have a shayla in such a case, because that certainly cannot be considered to be covering it, because Rishus 10 or more high is a separate Rishus. So what's underneath the bed and the top of the bed are considered to be in separate domains and separate Rishus. It certainly can't be considered as covering it. So what's the halacha? If it's with less than 3, within 3, then it's kalovet, it's considered attached to the ground, and it's covering. 10 or more is a separate rishus, and therefore it's not covering. That's the shaila, and that was not a pashut. He said in the previous brisa that we had, that the whole house is considered, even if it's Meya Amas, only considered like Dalet Amas. V'chein, Amar Balan Rav Yaakov, Brada Bashmuel, Halach Rav Shimon Elazar. But Rav Amar, Ein Halach Rav Shimon Elazar. He said that's not the halacha, so that's the machlokes.